You probably saw the recent pass rates for the 2024, the first sitting of the Level 2 CFA exam. And at a 59% pass rate, which is one of the highest pass rates we've ever seen. I think it's the highest pass rate in about 30 years, going back to when the CFA program was a relatively different thing. I think this is a big issue, and a lot of other people do too. Now, I may be wrong. Hopefully, we just saw some extraordinarily well-prepared candidates that sat for this Level 2 exam and the Level 1 exam. The results came out a few weeks ago as of the release of this video. Those pass rates were a bit higher too. So it seems a little unlikely that the group of people taking the Level 1 exam and the group of people taking the Level 2 exam happen to be relatively much more qualified, which is the CFA's terminology for who they let pass these exams, a justly qualified candidate, I believe. It just seems that they're doing something differently, and that feeling, based on these higher pass rates, really aligns with the feedback that a lot of related parties, especially candidates, have shared in the past 6 months, which is that the CFA Institute is changing the exams, and it's relatively clear that they're not getting harder. I think everyone with an opinion on the direction that the CFAI has gone with the exam structure and even the way that the curriculum is presented and the amount of information that's presented in that curriculum is that it's not getting harder. It's not getting more complex, certainly. So with that general belief and with the 59% pass rate that we just saw posted for this most recent Level 2 exam, I think it's becoming pretty clear what's happening. This is just a relatively short period of time, and I'm sharing my own personal opinion on this video. So again, numbers could change in the future, but it seems to be what it sort of looked like it might become when management at CFAI started making a lot of changes with the exams, which is a really watered down designation. And the reason that I say that a watered down designation or a slightly lower standard, an easier to pass set of exams, the reason I say that all those things are going in the wrong direction is actually maybe for the opposite reason that the Institute believes. I don't think that the Institute's, I personally believe that the Institute has this feeling that they need to make the exams more accessible and easier to approach, evidenced by 2 or 3 years ago, much more frequent exam sittings and shorter, literally 4.5-hour long exams rather than 6-hour exams. And then in the last 6 months, we've seen the curriculum change a fair bit, especially on Level 1 and a handful of sections within the books on Level 2, becoming more simplified. That focus that it seems the CFAI has on accessibility and simplification, I believe, and many people I think might share this feeling, will have the opposite effect that they're hoping it does. It seems that they want to make the program expanded. They want more and more charter holders out there in the world, and that just doesn't seem to be what's happening. So by making the exams easier, they're changing the identity of what the CFAI is. And if that trend continues, people on the internet don't like this. In YouTube comments, on other videos, on channels similar to mine, read a couple of Reddit threads about this topic on when they started changing the way that certain information in the curriculum is presented and certainly how certain questions are asked, that this isn't a change for the better. I mean, if you simplify things too much and you change the identity to more of like a standard in the investment industry rather than the gold standard in the investment industry, which seems to be, my opinion, the direction that the CFAI is headed with all this, it's not good for business. It's not good for what that curriculum is set out to be. And if you've seen this channel before, you know I'm a charter holder. So I totally understand that I may be coming off as a salty, prior passing charter holder who's like, oh, I took harder exams and now these kids nowadays are getting easier exams. That's not where I'm coming from. It's not about people having an easier time that I feel like I had. It's more about even the people who might want to pursue the CFA charter in the future still getting the same benefit out of that charter that I felt that I got originally and mostly feel like I still have, but certainly not to the exact same extent that I once felt, because that trend that the CFAI looks to be going in with these exams is devaluing. Ultimately, this is why I think it's a bad thing. It's devaluing the charter, because if you're a Rolls-Royce and you charge $400,000 or euros for a vehicle, and it's very inaccessible, and even sometimes people with the chops to buy one of those things don't like get an allocation, meaning, the relevant example in this world would be even extremely smart people sometimes don't pass the exams. That is a part of your brand. That's part of what the thing is. And not to mention, in the case of an educational program, it means the people were actually like more educated, right? With a harder set of information, a more detailed set of questions rather than more simplified questions. So it's fine. I could totally see or understand the logic if the management of Rolls-Royce said, hey, it's cool that we're Rolls-Royce. We're glad we're the top of the line. However, not everyone can get in a Rolls-Royce. So we also want to be accessible to the middle class. So we're going to create a vehicle that competes with Volkswagen that we sell for 36,000 euros or something, so that we have more customers and the Rolls-Royce brand is more broad. Maybe this isn't a perfect example in the automotive world, but the fact of the matter is people are going to go, oh, you can get a Rolls-Royce for 36,000 euros? This is a different thing than it used to be. And then the top of the line Rolls-Royce models likely would have their identity changed. They're probably still going to be great vehicles, right? Or similarly here, very educated investment professionals, but long term, and this could get debated in psychology or customer behavioral theory or something like that. Long term, I think that would be a horrible strategy for Rolls-Royce. And it's feeling like that's the direction that the CFAI is headed in. So people are not responding well to the changes that I already mentioned that we saw in the curriculum. With this new information of the extremely high pass rate at 59%, I think it's clear that exam's easier. I think it's relatively clear. Again, there's a chance that we just had a random batch of very, very qualified and very intelligent candidates. It was a lower number of candidates than we typically have seen. So you could argue that, well, only the best got through the last time, so now about 60% of them cleared this level 2 exam. I just don't buy it. And sort of a side point, but related to the difficulty of the level 2 exam, even 5 years ago, certainly 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have much of a following on, not that I'm affiliated with our CFA, but there wasn't much of a following on the CFA page on Reddit or Discord for that matter. So the biggest online forums were Analyst Forum and Wall Street Oasis. And on those forums, I remember being an early college student, early university, not even actually pursuing the CFA program. And the debates on those forums were like, is the CFA program the hardest academic program in the world? And is the level 2 exam the hardest single test that one person could ever take? And people debated whether or not that was the case. And I just remember reading those things going, holy moly, just imagine the amount of information that someone would have to learn. Imagine how smart someone would have to be, and imagine how qualified an investment professional would need to become in order to make this thing happen. Those were the types of conversations that were being had about that program. Not that it was drastically more different than it is today, but that was the public perception. And perception is reality, especially when it comes to designations in many cases. So nowadays, 5, 10, definitely 20 years from when we've had those types of debates, most of the threads are like, hey, can I speed run this thing in 6 or 7 weeks? And a lot of people are like, yeah, you probably can. And if not, just try it again in 3 months, and it's just definitely a changed identity for the CFAI. That starts with management. It's not the marketing team. It's not necessarily the people writing the questions. It's the management going, hey, let's shift the identity of this thing. This is also evidenced by the extra certifications. You've seen me on this channel talk about the private equity certificate, the ESG certificate, whether or not those things are actually valuable. The CFAI certainly charges a lot to pursue them. So hopefully they are if you wanted to get one of those. And those are further evidence that the CFAI is certainly expanding more, but just shifting the identity of what the thing actually used to be. it almost feels like it shouldn't be allowed to happen. And the reason I say that is because, consider medical school or law school, like a Juris Doctorate, a JD. It would not be permissible for, I know, actually, I don't know. I think in law, the state board is set like by each state. Certainly in medicine, that's a national organization that sets the standards there, and then every med school has to follow. It just wouldn't be right if those organizations then decided, hey, let's actually make this thing a lot easier so that we can get a lot more doctors and lawyers through the system, so that like we're a bigger brand or something of doctors and lawyers. That would feel ethically wrong, and I think like 90% of the population would agree with that statement if that were a thing to ever happen. And so, in my opinion, the CFA is the only thing in the investment field that's ever come close to like a law degree or a medical degree, and it has always served that purpose in the investment community and filled that void. Not void, but that's been its market share in the finance world, and that's changing a lot. And obviously, you can hear by the tone of me in this video. Again, I think it's changing for the wrong reasons. Making it something more accessible ultimately will make it less desirable for more candidates. So you might get a little pop in, charter holders early on by giving these higher pass rates through easier exams, but in the long run, it's not good for the organization. It's not good for the brand. By the way, if you're someone who recently passed this exam, I really do want to congratulate you. And it's not that I believe your exam was only half as difficult as prior exams. I'm just saying I think the concepts were a little bit more simplified than prior level 2 exams. And you still put in a ton of effort to get this thing done, and it's still a big accomplishment on your end. So although I'm sort of knocking the Institute right now, you should feel very satisfied. You should feel very good. If I were a level 2 candidate and I just passed, I would be ecstatic still, even given a higher pass rate. So I don't mean to knock any candidates or anyone that's pursuing the program. I actually feel if you're a candidate who recently passed, you should be writing letters or responding to surveys similarly in the spirit that I'm, sharing on this video, because you, as a hopefully potential future charter holder, have like a theoretical longest time horizon to be a charter holder than people like myself who have been for 5 or 10 years, because we're going to die off before you or something like that. And you're the one who's maybe most vested in the CFA staying the gold standard, not just an investment standard that the Institute may want to try to push onto every financial professional, which in turn would require a much easier exam or set of exams, but instead the gold standard. You should want the CFA to continue to be the gold standard in order to protect what it is that you've worked for, and protect this brand that you're hoping to become a part of, and partly are a part of at this point. So I'm not knocking the candidates by any means. I don't mean to put down the accomplishment that anyone passing these exams is accomplishing. It's just a change in the brand, and I think in the wrong direction. So I could be way off. Let me know in the comments on this video if you think there is some sort of big trend that created a much higher pass rate for these recent level 1 and level 2 exams in the spring of 2024. Let me know. I'm all ears. I'm happy to be proven wrong. I think most of you in the comments will agree with me in this, just because I've seen a lot of agreements in Reddit posts and in comments in other YouTube videos, like I mentioned. Hopefully the CFAI will seriously consider what I believe to be, and what I think many others believe to be, an attempt at the change in their brand identity, and understand how Rolls-Royce selling Volkswagens could be a really bad idea for the Rolls-Royce brand in the long run. That sounds like a bit of a harsh comparison, but I think it illustrates the concept that we're getting at here. So this video, probably publishing it with basically no edits. I guess you could say we're raw dogging this one. And if you appreciate raw dogging, then leave a like on this video or give me a comment saying, hey, this is the way to do it, just so I know I don't have to spend all that time editing videos in the future. Anyway, have a good one.